I think a lot of it comes from asking questions of your customers, right? And teaching your teams and your associates to ask more questions and listen than have the answers, right? And so it's not always about having the answers for people, but it's getting the information out of these customers around what are the things they're looking to solve for, and then determining how does what you have meet those needs, right? And so I do it all the time. I talk to our carrier partners very often about a lot of different operational processes, and I will often say, I would love nothing more than to meet you where you are in your process. How can we become part of the process you already have? I'm not asking for you to do anything new.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Jennifer Doty. She is a former Fortune 100 vice president, speaker, and author who helps leaders and teams get unstuck by shifting the beliefs that drive behavior and performance. Drawing from more than 20 years of executive experience and her own career reinvention, she equips organizations, business leaders, and leadership teams with practical mindset tools that turn insight into confident, measurable action. Congrats on shifting beliefs that drive behavior and performance, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you, Carl. So excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you about a topic that a lot of businesses are struggling with right now, which is keeping the clients they have. And a lot of that comes down to their customer success teams not being as effective as they could be. And so what are some of the ways that leaders can restart momentum for those teams and turn around the churn issues that plague so many companies these days?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question, and one that's always been a question. It's always a question on how can we make our customer experience better. And so I often, start the conversation with the team to say, as you think about the things that you are working on and the things on your plate, like what is your context and what's your vision? Like where are you coming from, right? Are you coming from the place of what's most important to me or to our company? Or are you coming from the seat of what's the most important to the customer or the client, right? And often it really is practice that, your associates and your teams need to reframe early and often, what is our point of view? What point of view are we coming from? And making sure that we lead with what the customer cares most about. Can you put yourself in their shoes, in their seat, and see it from their end?
Yeah, I love that framing, because so often there's all these tools and dashboards and metrics that customer success teams are using to supposedly track their performance, but so many of them don't include metrics that their clients actually care about. It's usually like the number of like meetings they've had, or the follow-ups, and the usage amounts, or depending on what the business is, but they're not tracking what's the ROI that the client got from this tool, or what are the metrics the client cares about, and how well are we delivering on those, the reasons why they bought the product or service. And so it is just that framing, or the failure of using that framing at a operational level and a mindset level, that undermines the chance of success from the get-go.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And so when you're talking with leaders on how to kind of restart this momentum and refresh it, what is a good starting point, or what's the first thing you often find needs to be done to make a real difference, and not just kind of give it lip service?
I think it's most important to start, like I said, with what the customer ultimately cares about. What are their goals? What are their challenges? Because if you can solve those things for your customer, they are more apt to engage in the conversation, meet you where you are, right? So starting with what are the things that the customer is trying to solve for? Is it that they want more distribution? Is it that they want to gain more market share? Is it that there's a problem within their company and a challenge that they're looking to solve. If you can fill those gaps and step into that space, you will be more useful to them, right? And so framing it to begin with, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve for the customer? And then next, most importantly, you can't gain anything from something that you can't measure. Everything needs to be measurable from an outcome perspective. And so what are the metrics that go with those outcomes that you can measure to see if you are making a difference?
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of the issue comes from, in general, just a lack of alignment on metrics when it comes to teams. Like the marketing team has their own metrics, and sales has their own metrics, and client success has their own metrics, and then the clients themselves have their own metrics, and none of them are necessarily aligned with the overall metrics that your leadership team cares about for their own business. And so it's when you're getting people to shift this mindset, what are some ways you've found of helping them get these metrics aligned so they're all tracking the right things? Because that seems like, if depending on the size of a company, if it's super siloed, there can just be so many kind of people digging their heels in and kind of resisting that change. So what have you found works for getting that ship steered in the right direction?
Yeah, I think you need to start with what size company you're talking about, right? So I've led huge teams at very large companies like MetLife. I also have been at really smaller companies. I'm at 3Flow today, we're about 120 people, and we're a technology platform, very different, right? And so I think if you are at a smaller company, you can have the luxury of, for the most part, all be working towards one goal. Right. I just got off a call with our engineering and product team a little bit ago today, where I was giving the sales update on behalf of our sales leader who's at a conference this week. And I said, I joked when I got on, I said, you're all probably wondering why Jennifer Doty, the head of operations, is here to give the sales update. I go, but guess what, everybody, we're all in sales. We are all responsible for sales. I don't care what seat you have at this company. We are all here for sales. And so that helps when you can align people all around one metric, right? And so if you can align on how are we going to grow our top line in a profitable way, that's incredible, right? If you're at a much larger company, that isn't as easy to do, right? I've led huge operations teams for MetLife in the group benefits space, where I had operational metrics I had to meet that weren't always aligned with what the business outcomes were, right? And so I had to straddle that line as strategically as I could to make sure, as an example, was I hitting my cost targets at the same time as I was continuing to maintain or improve our service metrics like customer satisfaction and net promoter scores and those types of things, right? And so I'd have to negotiate with both sides of the business to say, well, I can keep costs flat, and flat metrics on the customer satisfaction side are really up, right? I'll never forget the years I would say, well, flat is up in this world, in the way I have to manage this, right? And so you've got to be a little bit more strategic when you are, running different large organizations with different goals. But like, ultimately, as somebody who's led in operations, I very much understand I work for everybody, right? So I have to help the head of sales meet their goals, and I have to help the head of product meet their goals. And then I have an operational commitment to make sure our accuracy is the best it can be. And I have to often present trade-offs and choices to say, we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this. And what are those trade-offs, and what do they look like? And then ultimately what my recommendation is in it, but making sure I take all of it into account is really important.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it takes the idea of wearing multiple hats, or kind of be able to see things from multiple perspectives, is a key skill for getting that all to work. And often being in ways, a translator that is able to reframe certain actions and so explain how they're valuable to different departments, because, hey, this is all helping your metrics do this and helping their metrics do this, and overall adding this much value to the company at the top line? Is it more profitable growth, that sort of stuff? And as imagine that same skill set is valuable when you're talking with clients and getting them to see the value they're getting, because again, their perspective, their priorities, they're not going to necessarily care about your internal operational metrics you're trying to meet, but they're going to care about how those activities you're doing on their behalf contribute to their profit or growth or moving into a new market. And then that makes the renewal process much easier, because when they're consistently getting information that shows how the value they get from for being your client versus just kind of these standard boilerplate generic, here are some bunch of charts that all look like they're going up, but it doesn't really connect in a way that's meaningful to your business. That makes the justification of that expense a lot harder when it comes time for renewal. And so when
Yep.
you're working with client teams, and what are some of the ways you've found to like improve the team members' communication skills? 'Cause I imagine that's something that your eye for making those sort of translations is not something that you can expect anyone to come pre-equipped with. So what are some of the ways you've honed that skill over your career?
I think a lot of it comes from asking questions of your customers, right? And teaching your teams and your associates to ask more questions and listen than have the answers, right? And so it's not always about having the answers for people, but it's getting the information out of these customers around what are the things they're looking to solve for, and then determining how does what you have meet those needs, right? And so I do it all the time. I talk to our carrier partners very often about a lot of different operational processes. And I will often say, I would love nothing more than to meet you where you are in your process. How can we become part of the process you already have? I'm not asking for you to do anything new. I just want to know where we can meet you in that, and have it all be part of one process you already have, right? And so making things easy for a customer, I find is a really good skill to have, and offering that help and assistance along the way, and then teaching your team members to do it. Like I said, asking the questions about what are their gaps, what are their concerns, where can I help, I think is really, really impactful.
Yeah, I like that mindset shift from thinking you had to have all the answers to being curious about what someone else wants, and then responding in an appropriate way is much more effective, because and I think it's taking the sort of questions you're asking can't just be the surface level, easy yes or no questions. They have to be ones I think that are really get into some potentially uncomfortable spaces. But if you're able to really uncover not just the symptoms of the problem, but the real problem, which might be either embarrassing or difficult or really stressful for them to talk about and share with someone, especially if they're outside the organization. But it takes getting to those uncomfortable moments and those difficult conversations where the meeting wasn't just checking all the boxes during a quarterly business report sort of thing. It was really dug into some underlying problems, and it was stressful, and there might have been some disagreements on what to do next. But having those sort of conversations, if you're not having them regularly, then, and assuming that everything's fine, then you're going to get those, oh, they suddenly didn't renew. We don't know. It seems like it came out of left field, but really it's just because you didn't dig deep enough to uncover the problems and that really matter to them. And you were just kind of having these by the numbers routine check-ins that really don't add any value, but kind of feel good because it seems like you performed the client success role, but it was not a real connection. It was just like a facade.
Yeah, I do think, to your point, sometimes the most uncomfortable conversations can lead you to an opportunity. And so, as an example, there's been many times in my career, well, I've had a customer say to me, we see no value in what you provide. We don't know why we leverage fill in the gap, right? Whatever service, whatever product, whatever it is. Like, this does nothing for us. I don't know what we're paying for, right? Really uncomfortable conversations, Carl, right? And I think it's a great opportunity to step back and instead of getting defensive about, let me give you all the reasons why you should absolutely want to work with us and leverage our product or service or whatever it is. I think it's a great opportunity to step back and say, what would be of value to you? What would be helpful? What would solve a gap that you have that you've been struggling to find an answer to, right? And figure out how you can partner. Because listen, maybe your company doesn't do it today, but doesn't mean they might not do it tomorrow, right? Like, so what are those things that would drive value in their eyes? It goes back to their seat, their point of view. Stop worrying about it from what matters to you. Instead, worry about it, what it means from the customer's angle.
Yeah, I love that advice of not getting defensive and not just trying to shotgun all the things that you see as valuable, but because they're going to be, obviously they're in a mode where they're not happy and they're not likely to listen to any of your supposed reasons why they should care about the product. But if you get them to say what they would find valuable and then are able to connect that with something that you offer, the fact that they've said it and they've thought through it and they're like, this is what I really care about, then actually builds that trust and connection and shows the value of what they're going to get, because it's to something they already have that emotional need for. And it's not just a vomiting features and hoping something sticks. And it's one of those, like, it's nothing necessarily new, because I think any salesperson will tell you that if you get someone that you're talking to explain why they should buy your thing, they're much more likely to buy it. Well, the same thing goes for renewals. If they can explain, here's why what we'd find valuable, and you can connect what you do, what you're already doing for them to that value, they go, oh, well, then I see why we should keep paying for this. But it's having that mindset of, one, not getting defensive, like you said, because it's really easy to suddenly I feel like you're being attacked and uncomfortable, but then also getting them to explain the value to themselves is way more effective. And also just kind of shows the importance of having the habit of asking questions and being curious and not expecting yourself to have all the answers. Again, that seems like one of those key skills that is probably not necessarily taught when you're onboarding a new client success rep, but it's one that absolutely saves the relationships, especially when people are emotionally charged in the conversations, which you need them to be emotionally charged. You want them emotionally charged some way, whether it's super happy or super upset, because then you can at least deal with the problem. But if your meetings are all kind of tepid, no emotion involved, it's likely that you're just avoiding the problem that's going to explode in a big way and that you're not expecting sometime soon.
Correct.
So when you're talking with leadership teams, do you often find that the teams that struggle with asking questions to their clients are the ones that also have leaders that struggle with asking questions to their team members?
There can be. I think as a leader, our role is to role model the behavior we want to see in other people. So I've learned over my career, the more humble and vulnerable I can be and transparent in front of my team, the more likely they are to tell me things that are unfiltered, right? And so if I can be unfiltered to a point, that invites them to do the same, right? And that invites them to do the same with me or with clients or with other people, right? So I think as a leader, it's your responsibility to role model the behavior you'd like to see out of your team, as well as recognize it when you see it, right? And so I think often as leaders or managers, you're always, when we talk about coaching, sometimes people think of it as, well, that's constructive criticism. No, that includes calling out when people do a really great job at something and making sure you recognize it and you reward it, right? Publicly in front of people. So that's really important as well.
Yeah, I love that. The modeling the behavior and also just showing people that you see when they're doing the right thing and you appreciate it, not just assuming that they know you care, but actually vocalizing it and doing it in a way that they're, like I said, either in front of a group, or it might just be in different ways of giving feedback based on how the person wants to receive it. But just making sure that that person knows that you see them and you appreciate their efforts is so important. And it takes as little as 10 seconds sometimes, but is often so rarely done that people are eroding the trust their teams have them because they're not feeling seen. And it really doesn't take that much effort to build that sort of habit into your routine. So love that advice. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Jennifer. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you want to connect with myself or Jennifer more, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.